Welcome to Insight. Today we are chatting with Lisa Truitt, President of National Geographic Cinema Ventures. National Geographic Cinema Ventures produces and distributes National Geographic's giant screen, 3D, and specialty films. Lisa has generously agreed to share some of her experience with us. I'd like to thank you, Lisa, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
This has been such a fascinating organization to me, and I think to anyone who has experienced National Geographic's in its printed magazine form with the yellow box that ended up becoming the logo for the organization. Talk about the sensibility that informs your work and the work of the organization.
Well, if I can go back in history a little bit, it's very relevant, I think, to who we are today. Our second president was Alexander Graham Bell. And he had this, at the time the magazine was this dusty research journal, really for—
An academic journal.
Academic. And he had this crazy idea to put photos in the magazine. And this was very scandalous to some of the board members.
Cutting edge technology.
Exactly. And board members quit over this issue. But it was that willingness to embrace change in the media world and to move forward with that that really changed, set a sort of pathway for those of us that followed and changed the future of the magazine. And so we've always felt that with that legacy, we had to always be looking forward to what was coming, to what consumers were responding to, what they were engaging with, and how we could best be there and tell these stories and engage the public around these stories.
And exploration is, and storytelling are part of your DNA. The whole idea of not only exploring, but how you explore and how you engage these different means of exploration has been very important to how you pursue your work.
Right. We're very lucky in that we have evolved to both generate the news and then cover it. So we're a part of making these things happen that we feel are important to our mission and to the world. And then we also have the capability to tell those stories and get them out to the world, which creates this wonderful feedback loop where you can first engage, which leads to inspiration, which leads often to action, which leads to impact. And it's the fact that we are generating the science and the exploration at the very beginning of that enables us to create such a strong feedback loop.
The other aspect of your work that I find to be very interesting is that it's exploration in a very open sense. It's exploration with an intent to share, with an intent to expose. Mm-hmm. You're creating an open educational resource before that became a term that was associated with open source software and, mm-hmm. and sort of free knowledge movement organizations like mm-hmm. Wikipedia and so on. You actually created information that the public could consume, mm-hmm. But also with a strong scientific foundation.
Right, right. Yeah, we've actively in recent years really started looking for those early career scientists who had some kind of charisma or ability to communicate mm-hmm. beyond, above and beyond the norm, if you will. And we're really working to cultivate those. We arguably found Jane Goodall. And she's a great example of what we see as where we need to go to find scientists and explorers who are able to articulate and impassion people around what they do. And again, then to tell those stories.
National Geographic has covered deep outer space to deep inner space, mm-hmm. has covered land and water and air and peoples and anthropology and civilizations, urban issues. What kind of bounds do you have?
It can be pretty broadly defined. The place we draw the boundary is really hard to define specifically. It's one of those you know it when you see it kinds mm-hmm. of things. And we're certainly, as all smart organizations, constantly evaluating where are our core strengths, what are we good at, where are we taking ourselves off mission and off core, because we're going to all be stronger if we stay true to that core. Our position in the world on our axis has been founded on neutrality. We don't advocate that we have all the answers. There are other sides to every issue that are valid and should be aired so that our readers, our audiences can form intelligent opinions about what we're presenting. Often the evidence is overwhelming towards there is a problem here that needs to be addressed, but we do really strive to present it in an objective way to maintain really that credibility and that access to the stories that some folks can't access.
Could we talk about the various different types of technologies that you employ to provide that experience of the user or experiencer?
I think technology is one thing that's kept a 126-year-old organization fresh, is that at our core is this knowledge that we must follow and respond to technological trends and audience trends to constantly be innovating around where audiences and consumers want to be found, where they are being found, where they're going, and innovating our media around that. I think if you ever feel like you've figured it out and you know how to deliver your content to the public and it's working, and
somebody invents a 3D goggle and Google buys it and all of it, or Amazon buys it, and all of a sudden
and it's completely different, and that is called the Oculus Rift, and it was just bought by Facebook, and it is arguably an IMAX experience for an individual at home sitting in front of their computer. So we're among the first to be out there talking to them and looking at what this means and how we could innovate around that. So you have to maintain an entrepreneurial spirit within an organization that is old and entrenched.
How do you assure that there's not only the ability to retain people who are making these contributions and showing a symmetrical loyalty, but also ensuring that new members come to the team in a budget-constrained environment where, in order to get these new members to come in, some of these members who have been there for a while need to also leave.
Yeah. You know, that's management, right? There are sometimes hard decisions that have to be made. Some of it comes naturally, where people decide to move on and do something different for various reasons, then that gives you an opportunity. And some of it is hard decisions and the need to, as the media landscape changes, there's always a need to reallocate your talent and your strengths and your sort of human power into different areas. So as one thing's growing, this group may not need as many people and as much resource behind it, and so you reallocate, and that dictates where you're going to shrink and where you're going to grow.
And do you treat part of your talent pool as subcontractors and part of them as full-time people?
To some extent. I mean, I think definitely when we're on a big project or a project that we don't know where it is going to go, it makes more sense structurally to bring on people as contractors and test the waters before you commit, before you jump in with both feet and hire people on a permanent basis.
In terms of assuring product consistency as you go from these different products with different modalities, do you have a standards or quality assurance group that is part of your process of vetting projects and reviewing projects before release, or is that more inculcated into the culture of everything that you do?
It's both. I think the leaders like me, who are deciding what projects to bring into the development pipeline, have an instinctive understanding of what fits, what could be commercially successful, and also serves the needs of the brands and whatever funding partners you're going to need to bring in to realize that project. Once we've got a project in the works, and if there are questions around that, we do go to our standards and practices group and sort of say, could you vet this and give me some feedback, and we make a more collaborative decision. Often it's a little more clear-cut than that. It's kind of clear that a film, on the Everglades is going to fit our mission. But then once it's in the pipeline, we've maintained this reputation for so long by being really sensitive to scientific input and getting it right. And being able to still keep it entertaining.
How large is the organization that you manage? Can you give us some sense of its scope?
Of my group.
Of your group.
My group, there's about 10 staff folks, but it's augmented by a handful of contractors that are feel like staff to us. And then each project has a dozen up to, ultimately when we're in the field, 85 or 100 folks on each project. So there's varying levels of how you look at.
And how many projects are
size
you
of the
running in
team.
any year?
At various stages, from development through production through distribution, marketing, and release, probably 15 at any given time. But again, those
Right.
have varying demands on my time.
All right, so you might have several hundred people at various stages who
Yes.
are reporting into these projects. So
Yes.
your project management approach must be very sophisticated. You must have very complex budgeting requirements, and then once a project is budgeted, then delivery and managing all the detail through that. Do you have a project office that,
Right.
that deals with those
Well,
issues?
with 10 staff people,
Right.
it is very small, and I often joke about how I have departments of one.
Right.
So there is marketing, there is project management, there's distribution, and there's fundraising. And with 10 people, you can imagine how large each of those groups are. But yeah, we make it work. We augment when we need to.
Right.
You keep the core staff thin so you have a control over your costs, and flex and grow with a team of sort of insiders that are on the outside as you need to.
So your core team of people who are full-time are people who work across different projects. Their sort of
Correct.
expertise is project management and budgeting and
Correct.
finances and so on. And then the other people come in and out, and you probably use the same people across projects in
Right.
certain cases.
Right, so they have a familiarity with how we work and what our requirements are, which are particularly on the factual accuracy and quality side, often more stringent than others that they're used to, but they get to know what we need and they learn the system, and if they're good and we know they can deliver and we can count on them, it only gets easier as you build those relationships.
How do you make decisions on what you cover when you are considering projects?
We make decisions by considering a number of factors. You have to create something that audiences will want to see. So you don't want to put something out that is seen as good for you or medicine, because you will attract the people that are already in that camp and adherents to
Love
that.
castor oil.
Yes, people that love medicine or spinach or whatever it is you want to call it. I happen to like spinach, so it's an interesting analogy. But so I look at it as a matrix of, will this entertain? Is it marketable? Can I sell it? Will theaters or museums or whoever my clients are on that particular project embrace it and buy it? And then how can we engage people around it to create follow-up engagement and impact? Whatever that is, for every project, the impact is different. The additional thing I would add to that matrix is funding, because often to create these things, I have to have outside funding, whether that's from a government agency or a corporate agency or philanthropist. And so not only does it have to be something the public will embrace, it has to be something that's practically fundable.
Funders would like to fund.
And that you can find, there may only be one funder out there that cares about this issue and has goals around this issue that are aligned with your goals. If they're not aligned, it's not the right fit, because someone will compromise, and that's not where you want to be. But you find the right partners, and if they're out there on a particular project and those other things line up, then you've got a good one.
So I know every project is your favorite project, and your most recent projects are probably more favorite than others, but nevertheless, certain projects likely loom large in your mind.
For various reasons.
For various reasons.
People often ask me, what is my favorite project? And I always say, well, favorite why? Most fun, best outcome, most enriching. There are so many ways you can measure the outcome of a project. But you're probably right in that the most recent two do loom large in my brain. I'm just finishing up a project I've been working on for 3 years with Jim Cameron. And that's been interesting on so many levels and challenging on so many levels. But this revolves around Jim's dive to the deepest spot in the ocean in the spring of 2012. He financed, built, designed a submarine that was capable of doing that. No one's ever done it solo. It's been done once with 2 people, but they took so long getting down there. They landed, they stirred up a cloud of silt, they saw nothing, and they went back up.
Right.
So Jim is a big believer in the need for innovative engineering, and often from the private sector, and the need to explore these vast unexplored areas of our planet. So this project encapsulated everything National Geographic is about in so many ways. So I've managed that whole project from the expedition, the press, the media around it, the awareness around it, all the way through to a feature film that we'll release this August.
And the components of those projects are so interesting because you're doing a film on a way of thinking, a sensibility, a philosophy. You're doing a film on technology. How do you actually accomplish the outcome that you wish to have?
It's a bit of an adventure story. It's definitely a story of trial and error and hardship and never letting go of a dream. What we find is when people see it, they have the result, the reaction that I would have dreamed of, which is that they're inspired. And they walk away and say, I want to remember my dreams. I'd forgotten my dreams. I want to, and people have very tangible things. I'm going to go do this, I'm going to go do that. I let go of that. And so you've got them there in a place where you can now have a conversation with them.
And the connection between real risk, and real accomplishment.
Right, exactly. So people have connected with, I find often people, we all know this, connect with a human story. So you suck them in with that human story. It's a public figure. It's an extraordinary accomplishment. You've got them. You've got their attention. You've engaged them. Now what do you want to do with them? And so that's why I've thrived on not just making movies, but then turning those movies into much bigger impact projects.
To experiences.
Now what do you do? What is my dream? How can I go about it? How can I talk about it? How can my teacher in my classroom use this movie to teach about engineering, about trial and error, about the importance of failure, about all of these things? But I truly believe that the way to capture people to get to the point where you want to get is through an emotional, immersive experience of some sort. Film is one of those.
And we get right back to the decision by Alexander Graham Bell to include photographs in an academic publication.
Exactly, exactly.
So Truitt,
to take those risks.
thank you so much for sharing so briefly and in such a intense way the work of National Geographic Cinema Ventures, and thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you. It's been a complete pleasure.